Well, today we're going to be talking about a topic that I know is very dear to the heart of fifth graders, and that is some words that can be used in place of other words. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's take the word to or the word also. Hey, can I have some of that cake too? Hey, can I have some of that cake also? See how they're the same? They work the same. Here's another example. Consequently, as a result, like this. I went to Mr. Davis's house and I ate all of the cake out of his refrigerator. Consequently, he's not going to invite me over again. Or this. I went to Mr. Davis's house and I ate all of the cake out of his refrigerator. As a result, he's not going to invite me over to his house anymore. You see how some words can be used in place of other words and it doesn't change the meaning? That actually happens in math in one place as well. Let me show you. Times and of. Really, they mean the same thing in math. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, here we are with a picture of 4 groups of little flying space aliens. So here's a group of 3, another group of 3, another group of 3, and another group of 3. So what we have here is groups of 3 aliens. Right now I have 4 groups of 3 aliens. In other words, I have 4 times 3. I have 4 of 3, 4 groups of 3. What if I got rid of one of those groups? Now I've got 3 groups of 3, or 3 times 3. Means the same thing. What if I got rid of another one? Now I've got 2 groups of 3, or 2 times 3. I could get rid of another one. Now I've got 1 group of 3, or 1 times 3. What if I even went further? What if I got rid of 2 of those little guys? Now I don't even have a full group of 3, do I? Now I only have 1/3 of a group of 3. Or in other words, 1/3 times 3. I've got 3 only 1/3 of a time. Now that's an important thing for you to be able to think about when you're doing math, because sometimes we use the word times and other times we just say of. And you're going to want to know that for what's coming up next. Okay, at this point, you're going to need to pull out your student book and you're going to turn to page 129. And go ahead and pause while you do that and then come back and we'll continue. Okay, here we go. So I've written down the first 3 problems that are on that page. Now those problems actually go across the page. I wrote them up and down just because that's what I had space for, but they go across the page. If you look at the top of page 129, the first problem says 1/4 of 44 is, and then if you move to the right, it says 0.25 or 25 hundredths of times 44 equals, and so on, right? So we're going to look at these together, and you can put in the answers as we go through. Man, that's going to be easy. So let's see, 1/4 of 44. Well, I know if it was 1/4 of 40, that would be easy. It would be 10. And then I've got that additional 4, and 1/4 of that would be 1, so 10 and 1 more is 11. Or you might just know your 11 multiplication facts, so you knew that 4 goes into 44 11 times. So 1/4 of 44 is 11. You should be writing that in right now. Okay, remember this is the same as times. 1/4 times 44 equals 11. Now let's go down here. The next one says 25 hundredths times 44 equals. Now, I want you to think. 25 hundredths, does that look familiar? Because at some time in the past, we talked about fractions and how certain fractions and decimals are easy to memorize, like 1/4 is 25 hundredths. That's one you should just kind of memorize. 1/4 is the same as 25 hundredths. Kind of like 1/2 is 0.5, 5/10, and so on. Okay, so if this is the same as 1/4, 1/4 of 44 is 11, so wouldn't 25 hundredths of 44 also be 11? Yes, it would. So let's write that in. And then we have 25 times 44. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pretend that it's 25 hundredths because we already know that one. So over here, I'm going to write that it's 11. But then it's really not 25 hundredths. It was actually, this decimal point was over 2 places to the right. So in my answer, it needs to be over, I've got it here, it needs to be over 2 places. So I've got to fill in with zeros. So 25 times 44 would be 1100 or 1100. Like that. So go ahead and write that in your book, and then we'll go on. All right. Make sure that you've finished writing in those last 3, and now we're going to move on to the next 3. If you look across your book, you'll see the next one down is 26 times 44. To the right of that is 24 times 44, and to the right of that is 0.24 or 24 hundredths times 44. Okay, we're going to use some number relations here, some stuff you've actually used in the past. We're going to look at this first one, 26 times 44. We figured out what 25 times 44 was, didn't we? We figured out that 25 times 44 was 1,100. I'm actually going to write that in, even though I know it's the wrong answer. That was when we had 25 times 44, 25 of 44, 25 44s. In this case, we have 26, so we actually have an extra 44 in there. So we've got to add an extra 44 in. Well, that's pretty easy to do here. We'll just add an extra 44 in. Look at that. Go ahead and write that in on your book. Now this one works the same. Do you notice this is sort of like that find something close and then add or subtract technique we learned some time back? It's got some real similarities, doesn't it? So 24 times 44, 24 of 44. Let's do the same thing we did on the last one. I know that 25 times 44 was 1,100, so I'm going to write that in. But we actually don't have 25 44s now. We only have 24 of them. So we've got one less 44 than we had before. So we've got to take a 44 out of this. So I've got to remove a 44 from 1,100. Now I could write it out and do it like this, 1,100 minus 44. I could do it that way. I can also do it in my head reasonably simply. I know that it would be 100 minus 44 is 66. So I'm just going to, did I say that right? Is 56. 100 minus 44 is 56. So this 100 has to go down to 56. There we go. So now we have the answer to that. Now that we have the answer to that, it makes this next one kind of easy because you notice it's 24 and 24. The only difference is where the decimal point is. Okay, let's go ahead and write this number down here. Okay, now, in this case, the decimal point was here, right? Now it's actually moved over to the left 2 spaces down here. It's over to the left 2 spaces. So in our answer, we have to move it over to the left 2 spaces right there. And I better get rid of that comma because you don't put a comma there. So the answer is 10 and 56 hundredths. Make sure you get those written in. Pause, get them written in, and then come on back. Okay, I trust that you've gotten those last 3 written in. Now we're going to go on to the next batch of 3. I've written them, and if you look at your book, you'll see we have 1/4 of 45 is, then we have 25 hundredths of times 45 equals, and 25 times 45 equals. Let's look at them. So we're going to use those number relationships. We're going to use what we already know to help us find out what we don't know. So first we've got 1/4 of 45. Well, we know that 1/4 of 44 was 11. We figured that out already. I'm actually going to write that in, even though I know I'm going to change it. It was 11. But we no longer have 1/4 of 44. Now we have 1/4 of 45. There's one more in there. There's one more. There's an extra 1. So that means we have to take that extra 1 and we have to cut that into 4 pieces too. And so 1/4 of 1 would just be 1/4. So we've got 11 plus an extra 1/4. So I could write it that way, but I'm also going to write it as a decimal because I can already see the writing on the wall, literally, and I can see we're probably going to need some decimal numbers. So I'm going to kind of do an alternative to this. I'm going to do 11 1/4, and I'm going to write, or I'll write it down here, 11, and of course we know 25 hundredths is the same as 1/4. So those two are the same thing. All right, now we're going on to this, 25 hundredths times 45. Well, it's really the same as this, because 1/4 and 25 hundredths are the same, of and times are the same, and 45 and 45 are the same. So we've got 1/4 of 45, 25 hundredths times 45. Well, if it was 11 and 25 hundredths up here, then it is also that answer down here. And then you probably can see what's going to happen here. It's the same problem, just with the decimal point in a different place. Let's start out by writing this answer. I hope you're not using a ballpoint pen or a felt marker because you can't erase those, and you notice we're doing a lot of erasing. Okay, so the only difference between these two expressions is this is 25 hundredths and this is 25, so the decimal point is here on this one. Well, that means this is 100 times bigger, 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger. So we're going to have to move the decimal point over 2 places on our answer. 1, 2. So the answer is 1,125. Make sure you get that written in, and then we're going to do the final row on the first batch of problems. Okay, we're to the last line in section 1. And what we've got is 26 times 45, 24 times 45, and 24 hundredths times 45. Again, we're going to use those number relationships. We're going to use the things we've already figured out to help us get these. So we figured out last time what 25 times 45 was. We figured out that it was 1,125. That's what we figured out. But we don't have 25 45s this time. We have 26 45s. That's an extra 45. So we have to add an extra 45 into our answer. So I've got to add 45 into this. Now I would probably go 5 plus 20 is 30, plus that 40 would take it up to 70. So our answer should be 1,170. So I did 26 45s instead of just 25. Now this one's the opposite. Instead of having 25 45s here, we have 24 45s. So I'm going to start with 25 times 45. And now we've got, we actually don't have 25 45s. We only have 24. We have one less 45 this time. So I've got to get a 45 out of here. Now there's a lot of different ways you could think about this. I'm going to think about it as, if I take that 25 out, that takes this down to 20. I got to pull out an extra 20. That takes me down to 80. So I'm going to write 1,080. So, but I think I'll write it in the correct place. 1,080 is our answer, because it's not 25 times 45, it's only 24 times 45. Now, that makes the next one super duper easy. We put in our 1,080, but instead of being 24 times 45, it's 100 times smaller, because the decimal point is to the left 2 places. So let's just move it over to the left 2 places here. That makes it 100 times smaller. So 24 hundredths times 45 is 10 and 80 hundredths. Make sure you get that written in your book. Go ahead. Okay. On section 2 in your book, it deals with 3/4 and 75 hundredths and 75. You're going to be doing this partly on your own, but I want to get you started. So I've written the first line down here. 3/4 of 32 is, 75 hundredths times 32 is, equals, and 75 times 32 equals. So think about this. 3/4. What would 3/4 of 32 be? Well, if we divide 32 into 4 equal pieces, each of those pieces would be 8. We have an 8 and another 8 and another 8 and another 8. Altogether, that makes 32. And we have 3 of those 8s. So we have that. So we actually have 24. So 3/4 of 32 is 24. Go ahead and write that in your book. Now, 75 hundredths. This is another one of those benchmark decimals that you just need to memorize. 3/4 and 75 hundredths are the same. It's like 3/4. If you have 3/4 like money, 3 of them is 75 cents. There you go. 3/4 is 75 hundredths. It's one you need to remember. So if 3/4 of 32 is 24, then 3/4 of 32 is 24. Notice that I used of instead of times, and I used 3/4 instead of 75 hundredths. So 75 hundredths times 32 is 24. And now for this last one, all we have done is made this 75 hundredths 100 times bigger. So let's make our answer 100 times bigger by moving the decimal point over 2 zeros, 2 places. There it is. Get those written in, and then go ahead and try to finish section 2 on your own. Okay. If you're not finished with section 2, go ahead and finish it. If you are finished with section 2, take a look at the challenge. Give it a try. You're not going to be graded on it, but it'd be neat if you gave it a try. So try the challenge, and when you're all done, turn it in on Google Classroom as always. Okay, see you guys later.